What's up everybody, I'm Pony Lawson and welcome back to another episode of Tattoo Critiques. We're going to do a deep dive on some realism tattoos this week and see what we could do to help you end up with a better tattoo. So let's get into it. Alright, the first tattoo is sent in from Laurie Brown. And Laurie, you sent in this little peep tattoo with a dark, sinister vibe to it that I absolutely love. This tattoo really reminds me of an artist that I follow currently named Anrijs Straume, which we'll get more into later. I really love the way this tattoo takes up the entire canvas, from top to bottom. There really is no wasted space. And all the little things that you decided to introduce to this tattoo that make it really unique, like the flames in the back, the Hellboy at the top, and the little black liquid dripping out of his mouth. Starting at the top of this tattoo, I noticed you've got some good texture on the hairline, but that same texture isn't running through the rest of the hair. It would be nice to see some sort of skin breaks or some sort of texture, some line work, something else going on there rather than that flat black. And if we bring our eyes down to his eyebrows, we notice that's where a lot of that texture is happening. A lot of that same texture could be used up in the hair, and a lot of the same techniques that you have in the hair could be used for the eyebrows. What I'm saying is, I would like to see a little more texture in the hair and a little more of that dark shading in the eyebrows. There are lines around his eye and around his nostril and areas like that that just seem a little scratchier than the rest. You did ask me to rip apart your work, so I'm going to do just that. I know you're going to have some leeway on your artistic approach because this is a very sketchy style, but that doesn't mean you should be lacking on certain things like outlines. For example, around the eyes, nose, and the ears. I know I've said this once before, and I'll say it as many times as I have to. Outlines are the foundation of a good tattoo. Your tattoo can only be as good as your foundation. So if your tattoo has outlines, you want to make sure that those outlines are as clean as you can possibly get them before moving on to any shading. Daddy Pony has spoken. All of that being said, again, this is a tattoo that I really do enjoy, and I'm a huge fan of this style. The composition and design is the strongest thing going for this tattoo. You've got the word Hellboy nestled nicely between the two horns, and the fire on the sides make for a nice frame, gluing the whole image together. Obviously, adding all of his own tattoos is a very nice touch, but overall, the entire design is what really strikes my attention. But looking at the other work you sent in, you can really tell you know what you're doing. Just dial those fundamentals back in and keep up the good work. Thank you so much, Laurie, for sending that in. All right, the next tattoo is sent in from Julien K. And Julian, you sent this rather large octopus on your inner leg that must have hurt like hell. You mentioned this was a tattoo that was done 2 days back to back, and I cannot imagine going in on that second day getting ripped on that upper inner thigh. You also mentioned that this was done over 13 or 14 hours altogether, which blows my mind because this looks like a tattoo that was done over 20 hours easy. All the texture that the artist decided to use from the front tentacle all the way up through the body to the head to those little spikes that are on the head as well, this thing really has it all. I think the background is really cool as well. It kind of looks like the octopus is down somewhere in deep water with all the blacks and the dark blues, and you can almost tell that the surface of the water is at the top. You know, you see the light rays coming through and the white swirls. I think this tattoo is really kick-ass. And honestly, I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time talking about this tattoo because there really isn't anything that I would change. So thank you, Julian, for sending that in. All right, the next tattoo sent in is from Parise. And Kevin, you sent in this military memorial tattoo. It's nice to see you sent over a reference as well so I can compare and contrast. Right away, the first thing that my eyes notice about this tattoo is the heavy outline that this thing has all the way around it. I'm not sure if I'm a huge fan of that outline just because when you add outlines to things like this, it immediately takes away the realism factor. If this were a traditional tattoo, home run, my guy. But it's not, so we have to work with what we've got. When it comes to things like the background, I'm not a huge fan of the gap of skin tone that you left from the outline to that shade either. Start from the edge of the face and shade your way out. That way you wouldn't have to rely on such a heavy outline. On the right edge of the face, that's where all the heavy shadows are sitting, so I wouldn't have had any shades on that side. I would have left that area completely untouched and saved it for another tattoo. There are also some unnecessary white highlights running through this entire tattoo. You don't really need the white highlights running down the middle of the nose or around the mouth. And to be honest, it kind of muddied up that brightest part of the nose. It almost seems like you put the white highlight in there and then went back and did some blacks because it seems like some black ended up in that white highlight, which is doing just the opposite of what it should be doing. Generally, I like to save white highlights for things that are wet or reflective, maybe just as eyes, buttons, and pins. You also mentioned that you primarily like to do these with a 3-round liner only. That's one thing that I think is going to be hurting you. Every needle size has a purpose. I think it would greatly benefit you to introduce a mag into a tattoo like this to get you those smooth, soft shades that a face like this needs. As far as the likeness goes, I really do think this looks like him. You've got all the right shapes in all the right places. There are just those few things that are holding you back. But honestly, just changing up something like your needle size can immediately improve your work. So thank you so much, Kevin, for sending that in. All right, the next tattoo sent in is from Lauren Stewart. And Lauren, you sent in this picture of Uma Thurman from Pulp Fiction, a movie I've never seen, by the way. So the very first thing I notice about this tattoo are the lines aren't really straight and parallel. This is supposed to be a rectangle, but it kind of looks more like a trapezoid. A messy trapezoid at that. To be honest, Lauren, I'm not really a fan of anything in this tattoo. You want me to be as honest as possible to help you out and further your career, but doing tattoos like this is only going to hinder you. For the time being, I would be focusing more on traditional style tattoos, palm-sized tattoos and smaller, things with nice heavy outlines, things with heavy black fields. You really got to learn how to use your tools and know your fundamentals. If you knew how to pack a solid outline, it would make those lines a lot more clean, making this tattoo a lot more legible overall. Even the shades in the face, I'm not a huge fan of those shades. They seem very choppy and not smooth. Now, you may be an amazing artist on paper, but it's not really translating. Maybe it's time for some practice skins. I'm not trying to rip on you. I want you to do the best possible tattoos you can, but right now, you're really not doing this any justice. This being such an iconic image, and you not knowing your fundamentals the way you should, you're really setting yourself up for failure for a tattoo like this. Again, to reiterate, I just wish you would go back to smaller, more simple tattoos, because if we look to the left-hand side of this tattoo, that line that makes up the left side of the rectangle, I can tell exactly where you started and stopped. You've mentioned you've been tattooing for about 10 months. And honestly, it shows. But don't teach yourself bad habits. Go back to your foundations. I honestly think you'll get there. You just gotta put in the time. So thank you, Lauren, for sending that in. All right, the next tattoo sent in is from Isis. And Isis, you sent over this Salvador Dali melting clock. I like the general idea of this tattoo. There are a couple things that I would have changed, and the main one being that black shadow that sits on top of the clock. It doesn't really need to be there, and it's not helping this tattoo whatsoever. Had it been a lot softer, I think you would have gotten away with it a lot more. But as it sits, it's just very dark and a bit distracting. I probably would have moved this tattoo over about an inch just to give you some room to breathe and play with some of those shadows and tones that the clock is sitting on. There's a very hard shadow sitting on the left side of the clock where you've outlined in where the shadow ends. Get rid of that outline and you'll have a lot smoother transition from shadow to skin tone. I think you could have used some stronger outlines on the bezel of the clock, as well as some soft shades on the outside of that as well. I do think you could benefit from having a thicker outline on the bevel that's sitting closer to our eye. It would just give it that nice sense of depth. Again, there's not a whole lot to talk about in this tattoo since there's not a whole lot there. I would add a few outlines here and there and get those shades under control, but it's a decent tattoo nonetheless. Thank you so much, Isis, for sending that in. All right, now that the critiques have been wrapped up, we can talk about my favorite tattoo of the episode, which was sent in by Julian with this super sweet octopus tattoo. And I cannot express to you guys how much time and energy and devotion this kind of tattoo takes on both parties. This is not an easy tattoo to accomplish by any means. For the artist, the detail work, the color, the composition, and the highlights, this thing's got it all. And to you, the collector, Julian, bravo for sitting like a champ. That must have been a very rough 2 days, but it obviously paid off because this thing is killer. Thank you once again for sending that in, and congratulations. All right, guys, before we go, I want to bring up an artist who I think you all should be following. His name is Anrijs Straume, and he has a style all his own. He also has a YouTube channel, which I will link to in the description, and he has a very dark, sinister style that I think you all will enjoy, especially if you liked our first tattoo we critiqued, Laurie Brown. If you see one of his tattoos out in the wild, you can immediately recognize it as one of his. And as of late, I've seen a ton of other tattooers online mimicking his style, which is a great compliment. He also just put out a book called 10 Years of Tattooing that I cannot wait to get into. So if you're like me and you like that dark style, go give him a follow and let him know I sent you. All right, guys, thank you so much for sticking around, and a very special thank you to those who have submitted their tattoos. And if you haven't already, you can do so by sending them to ponycritiques@gmail.com, and maybe we'll see them on a future episode. So don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with your friends, and I will see you all next week.